Thank you, Dr. Rania, for a very beautiful attempt to bring in 10 to 12,000 years of the human history on the land of Bilad al-Sham back to life. We understand as indigenous people of that area of Bilad al-Sham that we are the last or the most recent generation in human evolution that has been going on this land, that we see it, we touch it, we feel it. And I don't know what is very special about us to be tested by the divines, by those criminals that have zero respect to indigenous life, indigenous wisdom, indigenous ways and methods of survival. Throughout our past, I would count up to 23 different civilizations. And many of those civilizations did not last long simply because they had a white man's attitude, in the sense that you would go into indigenous land, you destroy the people, you try to replace them, and you end up like failing. One example, because I'll speak about olive trees in a bit, we had like a white man marching from Greece to try to eliminate people some 4,000 plus years ago. His name is Alexander the Great. He left nothing behind but memories of massacres and slaughter. We got methods of planting olive trees from that criminal. So in a way, even if it was one of the darkest civilizations that come through Palestine, they would leave something unintentionally, I would say, for future generation to benefit from. I fail to see anything of that sort that would be left by the Zionist criminals on the land of Palestine. They have created an evil story and will only be remembered for their evil and irrelevant impact and existence on the land of Palestine, in particular in the land the west of the continent or the north of Africa, wherever like Arabs actually live. The talk today is about olive trees. Olive trees, as you all know, have been a source of not only nutrition, but also cultural significance. Is very, very empowering. Like if you wonder why 2.5 years or nearly 3 years of genocide going on and still people wake up believing that today is not my day. I have responsibilities towards neighbors, towards family, towards people to help protect them, help them survive. That steadfastness, that patience, where does it come from? It actually comes from a tree that survives through the hardships of the Mediterranean climate. The Mediterranean climate is very dry. It only rains 22 times a year. For the rest, is a very dry climate. And then that tree, when you come to it, it's very patient and never complains, and it provides you with plenty. We learn steadfastness and we learn generosity through hardship from those olive trees. Of course, olive trees, like on the land of Palestine, the oldest olive tree is planted near the town of Bethlehem in a village called Bethlehem. And that olive tree is about 4,500 years old. The olive trees that you see on the landscape before you would easily be like 800 to 900 years old trees. So when we speak about its sacredness, because all of the trees have made their way into Abrahamic faith, they are sacred in the Old Testament and in the Jewish Torah. They are sacred in Christianity. Also, they are sacred in Quran. The divine in Islamic wisdom combines himself as the Nur, which means the light, and he combines that light with an ever-glowing olive oil. In the chapter of Nur, that combination is very, very visible. And once again, it comes to remind us that olive trees that predate Abrahamic faiths became sacred because Abrahamic faiths recognized their importance and their significance in keeping people healthy, keeping people alive, and so on and so forth. So olive trees, you sometimes wish they could speak. Like in our indigenous culture, once again, olive trees are not viewed as things. You don't refer to an olive tree with the term it. You refer to an olive tree with this term she, her, and so on, because it's alive. It's a living being that outdates your human life. So what to do is help us think of the generations that will come. Like, of course, we don't plant olive trees because we will eat off them. No, in our indigenous wisdom, we have a saying that sounds like this: زرعوا فأكلنا نزرع فيأكلون. They planted, so we eat. We plant, so they shall. Who are they? We don't know. We don't know the names of the people whose hands planted an olive tree 1,000 years ago, but we definitely, every time we harvest their hard work, we are reminded of them. And then we do our responsibilities to the future generation, to people that we will not know their names. You not knowing the names of your ancestors and you not knowing the names of your descendants doesn't mean that those lives do not exist. So in a way, it helps in our culture, like, recognize that life is not the life given to you. Life is a part of a network of people who are alive with you, people who came long before you, and people who will come long after you. And you have a responsibility in honoring what those behind you left for you, and you have responsibility to pass it on to the future generation, if it's not in the same condition, in a better condition. So in a way, it helps you. Just looking at olive trees from a cultural point of view help you understand a lot of our culture in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, like in throughout the region. Also, olive trees like fit perfectly in the environment. So that's why they survive, because they adapt to the environment created by the climate of the Mediterranean. No other tree would survive in the same way as olive trees. Yes, we do have in every olive grove, we do have almonds, we have figs, we have oak, we have different type of trees, but like once again, the one tree that continues to survive is the olive tree, while all the other trees have to be replaced throughout the time. If you like also numbers, I would say olive trees cover nearly 60% of our arable land. The arable land that we have created throughout generations. When you are talking about arable land and land that is fit for agriculture, you are looking at a landscape that is made of hills. Put things in perspective, some 24,000 years ago, there was a miracle that separated Asia from Africa. That is the Great Rift, right? And the outcome or the result of that shift between the two continents was creating hills throughout the land of Palestine. You inherited hills that are rocky hills. How are you going to turn those rocky hills into places that could feed you and you feed your family? You invent terracing. The land of Palestine is full of hills that were terraced, and those terraces are probably 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years old. And it's a genius way of actually of creating life out of nothing. And that is kind of what is happening on the arable land, on the land of Palestine. So nearly 60% of the arable land is covered with nearly 7 million ancient olive trees. And each olive tree contributes, just to put it financially speaking, like every tree produces an equivalent of 9 kilograms of olives. Those 9 kilograms come to like 2 liters of olive oil. You are talking about like an income that family generates year in and year out that worth like more than $160 million annually. But of course, that income is not a capitalist income. It's a shared income, right? So there's no family that actually sells its olive oil. Every family sells the surplus, but primarily it's for family consumption. The surplus is used for other things. The surplus is used to give as gifts, to sell to whoever wants to buy, and also to, Rania mentioned soap. Soap was invented like in Nablus nearly 1,000 years ago, and it was one of the things that olive oil is used for. Olive wood production is something people have been working on for the past like 500 years, where we have artifacts that are made of the olive wood. So there's nothing actually left for a waste from that tree. Its leaves, when you turn the olive leaves into some kind of a tea, it helps balance your glucose and balance your sugar levels in your blood. So like every part of that tree is a blessing, whether it's materialistic or spiritual blessings. Olive trees have been targeted by the white man or by the Israelis, like ever since they decided that Palestine was a land without people. And that's from the beginnings of the 20th century. Palestine has been a land without people in the same way Australia was a land without people, in the same way Brazil was a land without people, Argentina, North America, the South of Africa, in the sense that the person who decides the humanity of human beings has to be a white man from Europe. So when the white man took out of Europe and went around the world spreading mass murder, exploitation, and theft of resources and murder of human resources, they rarely recognized that the indigenous populations were human beings. trees. So the failure to recognize the existence of Palestinians is a European cultural norm, because Europeans have always failed, or the white man in particular have always failed to recognize the humanity of indigenous people wherever they are. The founders of the State of Israel from day one have been busy eliminating and murdering the non-existing people, right? The Palestinian people, to the sense that more than 70% of the Palestinian population no longer live on their ancestors' land and their family property. When we talk about Palestinian refugees, we're talking about more than 70% of the Palestinian population on the planet, and we are nearly 14 to 15 million people. 70% of us are removed by this criminal regime. Our homes were either taken, furnished, as Rania mentioned, and homes that the Israelis do not know how to live in ended up being destroyed and flattened. So the Palestinian is removed. The evidence of his livelihood, his house, was destroyed or removed. And now we go after the evidence of his existence, which is the olive tree. Olive trees are not wild trees. Olive trees require human care in order to continue being productive. Yes, it's 4 days a year per tree, but like every tree requires that kind of human care. So when you see 1,000 years old olive tree, you're talking about 1,000 years of human maintenance and human care for those olive trees. So to remove the evidence of a human existence, Israelis got involved in the destruction of olive trees in different ways. Of course, settler violence is what the State of Israel likes to get cameras to focus on. Settler attacks or Israeli civilian attacks on Palestinians go on the rate of 6 attacks per day. So every day, regardless of what day it is, we have an average of 6 attacks that are carried out by Israeli criminals in civil clothes. Many people like to differentiate Israeli criminals in uniform versus Israeli criminals out of uniform. So Israeli criminals out of uniform are the Israeli settlers who've been busy burning down and chopping down olive trees. But that's a small number of olive trees. Nearly 1 million olive trees were destroyed in Gaza during the genocide, and they were carried out by Israeli criminals in uniform. Also in the occupied West Bank, Israeli criminals in uniform have destroyed more than 1 million olive trees since 1967. So one of the methods that Israeli criminals destroy olive trees is for the construction of an Israeli wall that separates Palestinians from Palestinians and separates Palestinians from Israelis throughout the West Bank. To build colonies, the State of Israel has more than 550 settlements or colonies that look like the settlement on the bottom picture, where the State of Israel would shave off like mountains, destroy hundreds of thousands of olive trees in order to build rooms for Jewish Israelis. Of course, the land is stolen, so the land costs the government zero. And then the Israeli government sells the houses they built on those lands, 400% of the Israeli government's investment. So the State of Israel makes those houses available for Jewish Israelis. So in a way, every single Jewish Israeli person is abused to do 2 things: become a resource of income for that criminal regime and legalize the criminal regime's process of land theft. So the landowner cannot have a claim against a Jewish Israeli beneficiary because their claim is against the Israeli government. The Jewish Israeli beneficiary is a beneficiary of a stolen good. He's responsible for that. But the actual criminal, the thief, is the Israeli government. And when they destroy land to install olive trees, remember, 60% of the land is covered with olive trees, so olive trees are destroyed. The State of Israel, in order to maintain mobility and connection between Jewish-only communities or settlements throughout the West Bank with the rest of Palestine, they pave people's lands with bulldozers and install highways and roads. If you look at the map from Visualizing Palestine, the red lines are part of the 1,200 kilometers of highways that the Israelis installed throughout the West Bank. The red ones are where Palestinian residents of the West Bank are not allowed to use those roads. The picture of the road in front of you from a village near Bethlehem or a community near Bethlehem called Birzeit, where the Israelis came in, destroyed the olive groves, and installed a road where the actual families that own the land in which the road is installed are not allowed to use that road. So it's not only that they lost their olive trees and they lost the land that they have been living on and off for as long as their families existed on the land of Palestine, but also you're not allowed to use the roads that they install on your olive trees. Whenever you're traveling on those roads, look on both sides of those roads, you'll find olive trees. It means that the road you are driving on used to be also an olive grove. The Israelis have been working tirelessly on changing the landscape of Palestine by destroying olive trees, destroying Palestinian homes, destroying our environment as we know. The destruction doesn't only stop on the physical destruction. Valia mentioned that in the context of Vietnam, but I'll mention it in the context of Palestine, where 24% of the Gaza Strip were always, every winter in January and February, would be sprayed with Agent Orange. Agent Orange is like the chemicals that Israeli criminals used in order to destroy the environment and the surface soil. In Palestine, together with the destruction of olive trees, they claim that they are making the desert bloom or make the desert green. The founding myths of the State of Israel is one, that Palestine was a land without people, for people without land, and two, we made the desert bloom, which is actually stupid because for 12,000 years before the State of Israel, that desert used to bloom every single year. The circle in the land of Palestine is that we have 4 seasons. We start with winter, it rains, and then the rain brings land to life. So then it becomes green up until May. In May, everything turns golden because of the heat of the summer. That's when you collect your wheat. That's when you get your dry, let's say, fruits and nuts and so on and so forth. And then when the end of the summer, you have winter again. So we have this circle of green and golden that has been going on for 12,000 years. They say that they made the desert to bloom. They are stealing the effort of winter. They're claiming that they are winter, but they are not. There is like some truth to their claim with the destruction of the land of Palestine. If you look at this satellite image from somewhere near to the west of Bethlehem, all the red dots that you see are depopulated Palestinian communities. Those were like vibrant communities, many of which were actually larger than the city of Bethlehem itself. But the residents of those communities escaped the criminal behavior of the Israeli army in 1947, 48, and 49, and then they escaped east towards Bethlehem. When the State of Israel was founded, they decided that none of those residents are allowed to come back. If any of them would dare to come back, they will be treated as infiltrators, which means they will be murdered, arrested, or deported. What did the Israelis do on those communities? They covered those communities with something like 300,000 wild pine trees. The wild pine trees that they used were imported from Europe. They are invasive trees. They are useless. And they replaced like the indigenous pine trees that we had in Palestine. Actually, pine trees that require 15 to 20 years to grow, and they produce like delicious and healthy nuts. So that's not what the Israelis want. They wanted something aggressive and invasive to cover up as much of the land as possible. So what are those pine trees useful for? They are useful for settler colonialism in the sense that pine trees destroy the surface soil. So the land is no longer good for seasonal agriculture and no longer good for your animals for grazing. So Palestinian way of managing the land was killed by covering that land with pine trees. The second thing is like it's a very dry environment in Palestine. Those wild pine trees are native to Europe and Northern Europe and wetland and frozen land. In Palestine, it's dry most of the year, so they are useless primarily like for large, massive bonfires. So every year, the Palestine has like wildfires going on, and Israelis will be like, oh, why do we have those wildfires? You have wildfires because you cover Palestine with dry wood. But every time those wildfires take place, every year, what those wildfires uncover is the truth that Palestinian communities existed and Palestinian families who have claim to those lands are not allowed to come and maintain them and claim after Israeli criminals. But we will be able to get back to those places. It's a matter of time. Each and every Palestinian family knows where they were expelled from. Each and every Palestinian family knows what is theirs and what is not theirs. Palestinians, when return happens, each and every Palestinian family will be able to get back, tend to their land and tend to their olive trees. And the last thing with the destruction of the landscape is that Israelis cover Palestine with Swiss cottages, and that's what they call settlements. So the combination of Swiss cottages and European pine trees covering the land of Palestine, it becomes easy for any white man to come to Palestine and see it as a replica of Europe and therefore feel like home. So when the white man man comes to Palestine and end up among Israelis, he will feel like home, meaning that Europe is home. So for the Israelis like who live in Palestine, they actually don't live in Palestine. They live in a replica that they actually created out of their racist fantasies on the land of Palestine. What do we do in the face of all of this destruction? Well, submission is not an option, so you do what you can. I've been involved in since the year 2006 is very simple. Israelis destroy all of the trees, we plant all of the trees. But we are not fools. We know that we cannot replace 1,000 years old olive tree now. We plant an olive tree now, so in 1,000 years it will be replacing the destruction that is brought upon us by the state of Israel. We also like to try to support initiatives to work on responsible, let's say, manufacturing of olive wood. People who try to revive like this kind of olive wood industry that once again has been destroyed by Israel's tourism, where the majority of our olive wood production is actually sold as if it was like a product of Israel or a product of the Holy Land, but definitely not a product of Palestine. So we're trying to also support initiatives that keep working on that, but also whose revenues can also be used for the planting of olive trees. So as they say in our chanting, لو خلعوا شجرة رح نزرع 10. If they uproot one tree, we will plant 10.